Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is spill. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear spill used is to mean to cause or to allow liquid to flow over the edge of some container. I wish this action, this verb, didn't happen to me so often, but I would say pretty regularly I will have water flow over the top of a glass. So I spill a little bit of water. A second way you might hear spill used is to mean to empty out or be emptied out onto a surface. Now, I hope this hasn't happened to you, but I have a very clear memory of dropping my school bag one time and having folders and books and pencils and pens and highlighters go all over the sidewalk. So I spilled my bag onto the sidewalk. A third way you might hear spill used is to mean to reveal confidential information to someone else. So, really, this third definition is about sharing a secret. You should know that spill is both a regular and irregular verb. To make the progressive form, all you need to do is add ing to form spilling. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed, and our base verb spill ends in a voiced L sound, so our past tense ending just makes a D sound. It would sound like this: spilled, spilled. Okay, so that's the regular form, but I told you that spill can also be irregular. So you might hear or see people use spilt for spilt, spilt. Now, if you're asking, well, which one should I use? It is far, far more common to use the ed form, the regular form of this verb in 2022. About 120 years ago, they were both very common, and if we go back 200 years, you will see more instances of spilt. Spilt is a little more popular in the UK than it is in the United States. But if you feel like I'm only able to learn one of these words, I would go with the regular or the ed form of the verb. And that's what I'm going to be using throughout the rest of this video. Now, let's take a moment to look at some phrasal verbs with spill. The first we'll look at is to spill out. This can have a couple different meanings. The first way you might hear it used is to describe having a large number of people leave a particular place or location at the same time. An example of this might be concert goers spilled out of the venue after the concert ended. Right? So a large group of people left. A second way you might hear spill out used is to mean to come out or to flow out of some container. So this particular meaning, spill out, many times is used to mean overflow, like there's more liquid than there is space in a particular container. An example of this: did the soup spill out in the bag? So maybe we've gotten carry out of some kind, and now we're asking, did some of the liquid flow out of this container? A third way you'll hear spill out used is to refer to someone openly displaying their emotions. Okay? An example of this: her frustration spilled out after the meeting. Okay? Many times when you hear spill out, I would say these are emotions that tend to be maybe a little more uncomfortable. So anger, sadness, and so this idea is that someone kept a feeling inside them for a period of time, and then eventually maybe they start yelling or maybe they start crying, but it's sort of like their emotions are overflowing their body. The next phrasal verb we're going to discuss is to spill over. This can have a couple meanings as well. One would be similar to overflowing. So again, going over the top or over the edge of some container. An example of this: the bathtub is spilling over. Right? So maybe someone forgot to turn the water off, right? And now it's running over the edge or over the side of the bathtub. A second way you might hear spill over used is to mean that someone or something is reaching a point in usually in a bad situation or maybe with some negative feelings, negative emotions. It can't be controlled or contained, and so it's sort of like moving either to another group or to another location. So, an example of this: the fight spilled over to the parking lot. Here, maybe there was some sort of disagreement that was started. Maybe it's in school, let's say, right? So the fight starts there. It's towards the end of the day, and the fight continues into the parking lot after school. Now, let's continue using our verb of the day, spill, in a couple different verb tenses. Today, we're going to practice the imperative and the present progressive or the present continuous, but we'll start with the imperative. You might know the imperative as a command. It's unique in English because there is no stated subject. Normally, our affirmative and negative sentences begin with a subject. I, you, we, he, she, etc., right? But in the imperative, there's no subject because the subject is implied. It's either you singular or you plural. Okay? So we can begin our affirmative imperative sentences with just the base verb. And when we're using this imperative, we're telling someone to do a particular action. And that can sometimes seem maybe a bit rude or a little forward. So we can always soften our command by adding the word please at the beginning, or we could put please at the end. You don't need it in both places, just one please will be just fine. So you can see that in my example here. I might say to someone, ooh, please spill their secrets, right? So here, I want them to share that confidential or secret information. Okay. Now, if you want to make a negative imperative sentence, your structure is going to be to use do not and then the base verb. So again, no subject here. It's implied. It's you singular or you plural. So an example of this might be, don't spill the hot tea. Right? So this might seem like a very forward or direct way to tell someone to be careful, watch what you're doing. I don't want the hot liquid to touch your body. You'll notice from my notes here, there's no yes or no question in the imperative, right? Because we're just telling people to do a particular action. Now let's take a look at the present progressive. You might also know this as the present continuous. They mean the same thing. I like saying present progressive to my students because I try and help them remember two P's to the name of this verb tense means I need two parts as I make my verb in the affirmative. So my two parts are going to be the present form of be and then the ing form of the verb. So we do need to pay attention to our subject here. Our subject will be followed by the be verb, and our be verb is different, right? It could be am, is, or are. And then we're going to use that ing form the verb. Here's an example sentence. The great resignation is spilling over to manager and senior manager levels. Maybe you've heard of this, maybe you haven't. So I'll explain what this sentence means just a bit. The Great Resignation is this idea that many people, as we were sort of coming out of the pandemic, decided, you know what? I don't need this job. I'm going to quit or resign. And this was especially true early on at entry level types of positions for whatever reason. And I think people had many different reasons. They decided, I'm no longer going to work here. Now, this is continuing beyond just that entry level. It's going into manager and senior manager levels. I've have a friend who works in HR, and she has been talking a lot about this, how it was very common to see entry level workers quitting, but now they're seeing more and more manager and senior manager level employees. Now let's take a look at making a present progressive sentence. To do this, I'm going to have my subject, and then I'm going to have my form of be that matches my subject. Then I'll use not, and then the ing form of the verb. You can see that here. The reservoirs aren't spilling over like they did 20 years ago. Um, Here, we are very much talking about a body of water. In different parts of the world, and especially in the United States, there are areas that have been experiencing droughts, periods with very little rain. And so, this idea that kind of places that would sort of store or hold water are no longer spilling over because they just don't have as much. Finally, let's take a look at making a yes or no question in the present progressive. To do this, I start with my form of be that matches my subject. That subject comes next. Then I have the ing form, the verb. Here's another example. Is COVID vaccination misinformation spilling over to lower flu vaccination rates? I heard a question like this posed to a doctor on a news radio program, and the doctor was saying yes, because there's been so much misinformation about COVID vaccines, now fewer people are getting flu vaccines as well. So this information is sort of continuing to affect outside of just COVID vaccines. Now, let's take a moment to look at some words and a couple of phrases related to our verb spill. And the first word we're going to look at is just the noun form of this word. So I've got the exact same spelling, the exact same pronunciation, but when I use the noun spill, I might be referring to just the act of spilling. So, an example of this: how do you clean up your toddler's spills? Right? We know small children are likely to spill things, contents really of uh, meals, drinks. They're still working on those motor skills. So here, someone is asking maybe for a little advice or insight. How do they clean up all those different acts of spilling? A second way you might hear the noun spill used is to refer to a quantity of some liquid that has been spilled. An example of that, you might hear people ask, how are they cleaning up the oil spill? This has been an unfortunate problem that has happened many times and will probably continue to occur, but it has horrible impacts to our environment. This idea of oil spilling into water or even into our soil, that can be bad as well. A third way you'll hear spill used is to refer to a fall off a horse or a fall from a vehicle. Could be even a fall from some standing position. An example of this: she took a bad spill on the ice. So really, I'm just referencing a fall. Now, a phrase you might hear is to spill one's guts. Guts is kind of a crude term. Sometimes we use it to refer to a stomach. Sometimes we use it for fortitude. But here, what we're asking someone to do is share really personal information about themselves. An example of this: I never spill my guts to my coworkers, right? I want a professional relationship, so I try not to share everything about myself to my coworkers. A second phrase you might hear is to spill the beans. This is used sometimes as a command, where someone is asking you or telling you to share some secret or some type of hidden information. So perhaps you've caught up with someone and your friends might say, ooh, spill the beans. Tell me what happened about this situation or maybe what someone said about someone else. But another way I have in my example here is don't spill the beans. So here's another negative command, a negative imperative. I want this to be a surprise. So maybe we're planning a surprise party, and I'm asking you, don't tell the person for whom the party is going to celebrate, right? I want this to be a surprise, so keep it a secret. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.